Chapter 1: Whispers in the Dark. Elliot Grayson had spent most of his career chasing the stories that no one else wanted to touch. Conspiracy theories, UFO sightings, and government cover-ups had all, at one point or another, graced the pages of his investigative blog, The Unseen Chronicle. But this time, something felt different. The stories he had been hearing weren't just from the usual fringe voices. They were from credible sources, scientists, astronomers, and even military insiders who spoke in hushed tones and sent cryptic messages before vanishing from contact. It had started a few weeks ago when a renowned astrophysicist, Dr. Olivia Carter, reached out to him through an encrypted email. The message was brief but urgent.
Mr. Grayson, I need to talk. The moon isn't what we think it is. Meet me at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich at 10 p.m. Come alone.
Curiosity had always been Elliot's greatest strength, and his greatest weakness. Without hesitation, he packed his camera, notebook, and a small recorder, heading for Greenwich. He arrived early, scanning the area for anything unusual. The night sky was clear, the moon hanging like a pale lantern above him. It seemed normal enough, but after years of reporting on strange occurrences, Elliot knew that normal was often the biggest lie of all. Dr. Carter arrived precisely on time, wearing a heavy coat despite the mild autumn air. Her eyes darted around as she approached him, the look of someone who had been watching shadows for far too long.
Mr. Grayson, we don't have much time,
she whispered, leading him toward a secluded bench near the observatory's entrance.
I need you to listen carefully.
I'm all ears.
For the last few months, several observatories have detected anomalies coming from the moon. Unexplained seismic activity, fluctuating radiation signatures, things that shouldn't be happening on a dead celestial body. But that's just the beginning.
Go on.
Dr. Carter glanced around again before lowering her voice.
We've intercepted signals, intelligent signals, originating from beneath the moon's surface. They're structured, coded messages, but they aren't meant for us. They're transmissions between entities down there, and they're coordinating something.
Entities? Are you saying there's...
An advanced civilization.
She cut in.
One that has been watching us for a very, very long time.
A chill ran down Elliot's spine. He had always entertained the idea that something or someone could be out there. But this wasn't just speculation. This was data. Hard evidence. Before he could respond, a low humming vibration filled the air, almost imperceptible at first. Dr. Carter's eyes widened in panic.
They know.
A bright flash erupted from the sky, casting harsh shadows against the ground. The observatory's lights flickered, and a piercing noise, like static laced with an otherworldly whisper, filled Elliot's ears. He barely had time to react before Dr. Carter grabbed his arm.
We need to go now.
As they sprinted away from the observatory, Elliot realized this was no longer just another conspiracy. This was real. And whatever was about to happen next, the world wasn't ready for it. Chapter 2: The Silent Awakening.
What the hell was that?
Elliot gasped, glancing over his shoulder.
They're aware of us now. That signal, the flickering lights, it wasn't just interference. They're watching. They're listening.
We need to get somewhere safe. Do you have a place?
My lab, it's off the grid mostly.
They hailed a cab, the driver barely looking at them as they climbed in. Dr. Carter gave a nondescript address outside the city, and they rode in silence, the weight of their discovery settling between them. After what felt like an eternity, they arrived at a small, unmarked building tucked between abandoned warehouses. Dr. Carter led the way inside, quickly securing the door behind them. The lab was cluttered with research papers, monitors displaying real-time lunar data, and a massive whiteboard filled with equations and waveforms.
You need to tell me everything.
Dr. Carter pulled up a file on her computer, displaying grainy but unmistakable footage, large, black, monolithic structures emerging from beneath the moon's surface. The timestamps showed they had begun moving hours ago.
They're waking up,
she whispered.
And no one else knows?
The government has their suspicions, but they don't know the scale of it. They think it's just seismic activity, but it's not. These ships, whatever they are, have been dormant for centuries. Something has triggered them. Psst.
And if they're waking up, it means they're ready.
The room fell into heavy silence. Outside, the world remained oblivious, but the countdown had begun. Chapter 3: The First Signs. A night later, the world saw it. The moon, once a pale and serene sentinel in the sky, now glowed with sporadic bursts of light. At first, astronomers speculated about solar activity reflecting off the lunar surface, but the pattern was unmistakable. The lights weren't random, they were coordinated, a message written in beams visible to the naked eye. Elliot knew it was time to go public. Seated in his cluttered apartment, he typed furiously, detailing everything Dr. Carter had revealed. He attached images, satellite data, and reports from anonymous government insiders who had begun whispering of military mobilization. By sunrise, his article was live. The moon is waking up, and we're not ready. The response was immediate. Public panic ensued, looting, riots, and chaos erupted in cities worldwide. Governments put their militaries on high alert, but it was too late. The alien ships had formed in lunar orbit, systematically disabling human satellites. Governments reached out to Elliot, desperate for answers, while Dr. Carter worked tirelessly to convince officials that collaboration was the only way forward. The first attack came swiftly, alien ships descending from orbit, obliterating military installations with surgical precision. The war had begun. Chapter 4, Earth Under Siege. The destruction was swift and precise. Military bases, missile silos, and naval fleets were wiped out before nations could even attempt retaliation. Cities trembled as the world's governments scrambled to mount a defense. Elliot found himself at the center of it all. Whisked away to a secure underground facility, he faced a room filled with world leaders and military officials, their faces grim.
We need to understand what they want.
A U.S. general demanded.
You said Dr. Carter believes they've been watching us. Why now?
Dr. Carter, now an advisor to global leaders, took a deep breath.
They believe the Earth is better off without us. We need to prove them wrong before they decide to finish the job.
Chapter 5, The Battle Begins. In a desperate bid to defend Earth, the world's militaries launched a coordinated counterattack. Fighter jets and missile systems engaged the alien ships, but their efforts proved futile. The alien technology rendered human weapons ineffective, effortlessly neutralizing attacks with advanced energy shields. Meanwhile, the aliens made their next move. Massive transport crafts descended from orbit, deploying ground forces in strategic locations across the planet. These humanoid invaders, clad in sleek, impenetrable armor, began their occupation of key cities. Elliot, now a critical voice in shaping the global narrative, continued to report on the invasion. His words galvanized some into resistance, while others sought surrender or collaboration. Humanity was divided, some choosing to fight, others seeking negotiation, and a few surrendering outright. Dr. Carter, working tirelessly with a team of scientists, searched for a vulnerability in the alien forces. If Earth had any hope of survival, it would lie in uncovering their one weakness before it was too late. The world was at war, and it was only just beginning. Chapter 6, The Resistance Grows. With the initial counterattack having failed, humanity turned its efforts towards saving as many civilians as possible. Cities fell into chaos, and governments repurposed military forces to evacuate and shelter survivors. Underground bunkers, repurposed subway stations, and remote locations became safe havens for those fleeing the expanding alien-controlled zones. The aliens, showing no signs of slowing down, methodically expanded their control zones, erecting massive monolithic structures that pulsed with an eerie glow. Within these zones, human technology failed, communications were blocked, and resistance fighters who entered never returned. Fear and desperation spread as the invaders solidified their hold. Determined to document the horrors firsthand, Elliot ventured into occupied areas, embedding himself within the scattered resistance groups forming across the world. Armed with nothing but a camera and his voice, he recorded the brutal efficiency of the alien expansion, sending footage to any remaining news networks and broadcasting on underground frequencies. His reports became a beacon of defiance, uniting humanity in their shared struggle. Meanwhile, in a hidden laboratory, Dr. Carter and her team made a crucial discovery. Through intercepted alien transmissions and captured energy signatures, they found a startling link. Microwave frequencies appeared to interfere with the aliens' neurological activity. It wasn't a weapon, not yet, but it was a clue, a thread of hope in an otherwise bleak war. Despite the growing despair, something remarkable was happening. Across the globe, people were putting aside old divisions, standing together against a common enemy. Former rival nations worked side by side, pooling resources, sharing intelligence, and building new strategies. Civilians fought alongside soldiers, scientists worked tirelessly to understand the enemy, and underground resistance groups coordinated their efforts like never before. The world was no longer just fighting for survival. It was fighting for unity, for humanity itself. And the war was far from over. Chapter 7, The Tipping Point. With the discovery of the aliens' vulnerability to microwave frequencies, humanity shifted its focus toward developing a large-scale weapon capable of disrupting their neurological functions. Engineers and scientists across the world worked tirelessly in hidden laboratories, racing against time to create a device that could turn the tide of war. Despite the fear gripping the world, Elliot continued reporting, embedding himself deeper within the resistance. His broadcasts were the only unfiltered source of truth left, exposing the atrocities and relaying critical information to survivors. But his defiance did not go unnoticed. The aliens, recognizing his influence, began actively hunting him, sending specialized drones and informants into occupied zones to track his movements. At the same time, world leaders, desperate for a solution, made a last-ditch effort to communicate with the invaders. Using intercepted alien frequencies, they sent a transmission, an attempt to negotiate, to understand their true intentions. The message was simple: can peace exist between us? For days, there was silence. Then an answer came, not in words but in action. Alien forces halted their advance in several regions, pausing just long enough to make humanity question their next move. Was it an invitation to talk, or a momentary pause before delivering the final blow? Dr. Carter, working furiously in her hidden lab, refined the microwave disruption theory. Through experimentation, she found that the frequencies not only interfered with the aliens' brains, but also disrupted their communication systems. If deployed strategically, the weapon could sever their ability to coordinate attacks. But manufacturing the technology on a large enough scale remained a daunting challenge. The world stood at a crossroads. Overwhelmed by destruction but resolute in their determination to win, humanity faced an uncertain future. Some clung to the hope of diplomacy, while others prepared for all-out war. Elliot, despite the danger, pushed forward, determined to uncover the truth behind the aliens' pause. Were they hesitating because they saw something worth saving, or were they simply deciding the most efficient way to end mankind? The battle for Earth was far from over, and soon the ultimate decision would be made. Chapter 8, The Moment of Reckoning. Despite the fragile pause in the conflict, humanity refused to waste a moment. While world leaders pushed for more communication with the invaders, scientists and military engineers worked furiously to perfect the microwave weapon. It was a race against time, hoping for peace while preparing for war. Then, the aliens made their next move. A global transmission cut across all frequencies, appearing on every screen, radio, and communication network. The message was simple, chilling in its directness: submit or be erased. You have 3 days. The ultimatum sent shockwaves through the resistance. Some saw it as proof that the aliens could be reasoned with. If they were issuing a demand instead of attacking, perhaps they were willing to negotiate. Others saw it as a death sentence, proof that any plea for peace was futile. The world braced for what would come next. Meanwhile, Elliot found himself in the most dangerous position of his life. While traveling with a resistance group to document conditions inside an occupied city, an ambush turned into chaos. A sudden, blinding flash filled the streets. When Elliot's vision cleared, he was no longer among his comrades. He was face to face with them. The aliens stood before him, tall, humanoid, their elongated heads and piercing black eyes unreadable. Their forms pulsed with an eerie energy, as though light itself bent around them. One of them stepped forward, towering over him. "You speak for them," the alien's voice echoed in his mind, bypassing speech entirely. "Tell us why your kind fights." In that moment, Elliot realized he had been chosen, not by humanity, but by the invaders themselves. He was no longer just reporting on the war, he had become a part of it. Meanwhile, in a hidden lab deep underground, Dr. Carter and her team ran the first real test of their weapon. A captured alien, retrieved in a daring resistance raid, had been restrained for study. As the device activated, a pulse of concentrated microwave energy filled the chamber. The results were immediate and shocking. The alien let out a piercing, psychic scream. Its body convulsed, collapsing to the ground as the energy overwhelmed its neural pathways. When the pulse ceased, the alien lay still, unconscious but alive.
It works.
Dr. Carter turned to her team. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity had struck back. And now, with Elliot standing before the invaders, humanity's fate balanced on the edge of a knife. The countdown had begun. Chapter 9. Secrets Unveiled. With the deadline of the alien ultimatum approaching, world leaders made one last desperate attempt at diplomacy. Through newly developed communication channels, they sent a message into the void, pleading for peaceful coexistence. The world held its breath, waiting for a response. Meanwhile, Elliot stood in the presence of the invaders, their elongated forms towering over him. The one who had spoken before addressed him again, its voice resonating in his mind.
You seek answers.
It said.
You will have them.
Elliot was flooded with visions, images of a world long before human civilization, a pristine Earth untouched by industry and war. The aliens had been here before, watching as humanity grew and spread like wildfire. Their true purpose was not conquest, but restoration. They viewed humanity as a threat to the planet itself, a force of destruction that had deviated from nature's balance.
You were given time to prove yourselves.
The alien continued.
You failed.
But Elliot saw something else in their vision. Doubt. The invaders were not entirely convinced that humanity was beyond redemption. He seized the opportunity.
If we were a lost cause, you wouldn't be hesitating.
Elliot said firmly.
You've seen our destruction, but have you seen our resilience, our capacity to change?
The alien did not respond immediately. Instead, it turned and left the room. Minutes later, a blaring alarm echoed through the alien stronghold. The moment of hesitation had given Elliot his chance. In the chaos, he broke free from his restraints, navigating the strange corridors until he found an exit. With sheer determination and luck, he evaded the guards and made his way back to the surface, barely escaping with his life. At the same time, Dr. Carter's team made a breakthrough. With the weapon's effectiveness confirmed, mass production had begun in hidden locations across the globe. The first units were already being shipped to resistance cells, and the tide of war was about to change. News of Elliot's escape and the weapon's deployment ignited hope across humanity. For the first time, the fear of extinction was being replaced by determination. People no longer saw themselves as victims, but as a force willing to fight for their place on Earth. The final battle had yet to come, but for the first time, it felt winnable. Chapter 10. The Final Surge. Elliot's escape had not gone unnoticed. The aliens, realizing their hesitation had given humanity a chance to resist, accelerated their plans. Their forces moved with new urgency, deploying massive fleets and constructing energy fields that shielded their strongholds. The invasion had entered its most brutal phase. Elliot, now the face of the resistance, worked alongside military strategists and newly defected aliens who had broken away from the invaders' control. These defectors, understanding their species' vulnerabilities, provided critical intelligence on weak points in the enemy's infrastructure. Under Elliot's leadership, the resistance moved with newfound precision, turning the tide of war. However, the aliens were not so easily defeated. Adapting quickly, they developed countermeasures, armor that blocked microwave interference, new aerial tactics, and cybernetic enhancements that made them resistant to human weapons. Each victory was met with an evolved counterattack, forcing humanity into a race against time to stay ahead. Despite the escalating conflict, hope flourished. The people of Earth, once scattered and divided, now stood together. Nations long at odds fought side by side, civilians took up arms, and the knowledge that the aliens could be hurt fueled a growing confidence. Humanity had faced extinction and refused to go quietly. The war was reaching its climax. The final battle loomed on the horizon, and Elliot knew that the fate of the planet rested on the next decision humanity made. Chapter 11. The War for Earth. With humanity's new microwave technology proving effective, Dr. Carter and her team worked tirelessly to refine it. The latest advancement ensured the signal never repeated, making it impossible for the aliens to develop countermeasures. As the modified weapons were deployed globally, humanity's forces began striking back with unprecedented precision. But the aliens were not done yet. Realizing they were losing ground, the invaders unleashed their most devastating attack yet. Massive energy pulses erupted from their warships, leveling entire cities in seconds. Their forces descended in overwhelming numbers, seeking to crush humanity's last resistance before the microwave weapon could be fully deployed. The battle had reached its most desperate hour. Elliot, now recognized as the leader of the resistance, took command of the global effort. He coordinated attacks across continents, uniting the remaining military and civilian forces under a single strategy. His broadcasts became rallying cries, urging people not to surrender but to fight with everything they had. Meanwhile, Dr. Carter achieved the breakthrough that could turn the tide completely. An amplification system that allowed the microwave weapon to function over thousands of miles simultaneously. Instead of isolated attacks, humanity could now strike at the aliens wherever they stood, disrupting their forces on a planetary scale. As the final battle erupted, the entire world became a war zone. Every city, every town, every stronghold turned into a battleground. The skies were filled with fire, alien ships clashing against human fighters, while ground forces fought in the streets. The microwave weapons roared to life, sending waves of disruption through the alien ranks, forcing them to falter. Hope burned bright. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity was no longer just surviving, it was winning. The war for Earth had begun in full, and there would be no turning back. Chapter 12: The Breaking Point. The world was ablaze with battle. Skies darkened under the weight of smoke and fire, and the ground trembled as cities turned into war zones. Humanity had turned its desperation into action, deploying the enhanced microwave weapon on a global scale. The battle lines had shifted, and for the first time, the alien advance slowed. Their once unbeatable war machines faltered under the relentless waves of disruption, their ranks thrown into disarray. Yet, the aliens refused to surrender. With their forces scattered and their neural networks disrupted, the invaders resorted to their final strategy, a last-ditch attempt to obliterate Earth's infrastructure. Massive alien carriers descended over the largest remaining strongholds of human resistance, targeting power plants, communication hubs, and supply routes. Their goal was clear. If they could not win, they would ensure humanity had nothing left to rebuild. Elliot stood at the center of the resistance headquarters, deep in an underground bunker in the Swiss Alps. The world's remaining military leaders looked to him for direction. Reports streamed in from every continent, victories, losses, and desperate last stands. The situation was precarious. If the aliens succeeded in crippling Earth's remaining infrastructure, humanity's advantage would vanish overnight. A coalition of scientists and engineers made one final breakthrough. If they could amplify the microwave weapon's signal through Earth's own electromagnetic field, they could blanket the entire planet in a continuous disruption wave, permanently disabling the aliens' ability to communicate and coordinate.
It's risky,
She admitted.
We have no way of knowing if it will affect us too. If we miscalculate, we could short-circuit every electronic device on the planet.
Elliot stared at the data. The choice before them was stark: gamble everything on one final strike, or fight an increasingly unwinnable war of attrition.
Do it?
He said finally. We've come too far to let them win now. The order was given. Around the world, resistance forces fought to buy time as the final modifications were made. A network of satellites and ground-based transmitters was repurposed for a singular purpose: to unleash the largest microwave burst in history. Engineers and technicians worked tirelessly, knowing that every passing second brought the aliens closer to total annihilation, or humanity to its own doom. As the countdown began, the world held its breath. At 0 hour, the pulse was unleashed. A silent wave rippled across the planet, invisible yet immeasurably powerful. Alien ships shuddered in midair, their pilots collapsing as their neural links were severed. Their machines powered down, weapons fell silent, and entire fleets drifted aimlessly in the sky before crashing to the earth below. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the cheering began. Across the world, humans emerged from bunkers and hiding places, watching in awe as their once unstoppable enemies crumbled. The war was over. The Earth belonged to humanity once more. Elliot and Dr. Carter stood side by side, watching as the alien threat dissolved before their eyes. There was no victory speech, no grand declaration, just an overwhelming sense of relief. But as the dust settled, one question remained unanswered. Had humanity truly won, or had they merely survived long enough to face whatever came next? The battle was over, but the story was far from finished. Epilogue, Shadows and Echoes. The war was over, but its scars remained. Cities lay in ruins, the Earth's atmosphere still thick with the smoke of battle. Yet amid the devastation, something new was emerging, a world united not by war, but by survival. For the first time in history, humanity saw itself as one. The divisions of race, religion, and borders that once fueled endless conflicts now seemed insignificant. The lesson of the invasion was clear. Humans were all the same, fragile in the face of extinction, and now together, they would rebuild. The great nations pooled their resources, not to dominate, but to heal. What had once been a fractured world order became a true global alliance. Scientists and engineers worked together to repair the damage, leaders cooperated with an unprecedented level of trust, and the survivors of the invasion forged a new era of cooperation. The war had nearly destroyed them, but in the ashes, humanity found something greater than victory: unity. Yet, even as the world celebrated, a shadow remained. The surviving aliens did not all perish in the final battle. Many were found lifeless inside their fallen ships, their neural networks permanently severed by the microwave pulse. But others, those who had disconnected before the attack, had vanished. Somewhere beneath the Earth's surface, they were regrouping, watching, waiting. Their empire had not been defeated, merely wounded. And wounds, given time, heal. Name became legend, a symbol of defiance and truth. He had fought for Earth, and now he was at peace. Dr. Olivia Carter, however, was far from finished. While others celebrated and rebuilt, she remained haunted. The aliens had come with the singular goal of reclaiming Earth for nature, seeing humans as a disease, and yet they had hesitated. They had tried to warn humanity before launching their attack. Why? What had truly driven them? Were they part of something even larger? Obsessed, she threw herself into studying the remnants of their technology, deciphering alien scripts, and listening for any remaining signals. She was convinced that this war was just the beginning, that something greater was still out there, watching, waiting. And deep beneath the Earth, in hidden caverns and darkened tunnels, the remnants of the alien forces nursed their wounds. Their empire had not been defeated, only delayed. They would return, and next time, they would not underestimate humanity. For now, the Earth belonged to its people, but the war for its future was far from over.